Here we are. Psychedelics today. Solidarity Friday. Michelle Janikian, Kyle Buller, Joe Moore. How you both doing?
Great.
Doing well.
Great. And Michelle, we did not mention last week that you're going to be joining us on a regular basis on the podcast and helping with editing and writing and much more at Psychedelics today. So wanted to make sure we pointed that out today. Sorry for missing
Welcome
it last
to the
time.
team, Michelle.
Yeah, no, it's such an honor. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited to be helping out more. I really believe in what you're all doing, so I'm excited.
Same here. Yeah, it's going to be really cool what we get done in the next year or two. Yeah. All right. Before we jump into news, just want to remind folks that we have a bunch of seats left. Well, actually, maybe not a bunch, maybe 10 seats left total for our 2 different Navigating Psychedelics courses starting in early March. So if you want to secure a spot, jump in soon, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. Yeah, and Kyle, you just had a ketamine training with Dr. Melanie Pincus, neuroscientist, and you said it was pretty comprehensive, right?
If you're into neuroscience and you can follow that,
Maybe a little more neuroscience than you expected.
But it was wonderful. I mean, it was very comprehensive and a really awesome overview of the neuroscience of ketamine. And that class was called Mind-Bending, Mind-Mending. And we're probably going to do a series on the neuroscience of the various psychedelic compounds. Obviously, ketamine's a dissociative anesthetic, but since it's being used in that setting, we started off with ketamine.
Right on. Yeah. And that was for CE. We'll probably do more of those, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. We'll probably be offering the ketamine class again. And then I believe Melanie is going to, again, kind of sketch out the neuroscience of the other compounds as well.
Great.
It was fun.
Cool. And I've kicked off my clergy course or series. That's been really fun. Only one meeting so far. Next meeting, we're going to have some really great stuff. It's amazing how many Christian clergy in the US and Canada are already quite active in the space. So stay tuned for more. It was really fascinating. I'm like, this is shocking that all of you have this much experience. Like, I wish you were my priest. Maybe I wouldn't have left. But, you never know. I don't know. So room for growth here. And I think there's going to be a lot of really interesting collaborations going forward with, religions in the US and psychedelics. Yeah.
So fascinating. I can't wait to learn more. So cool.
Yeah. All right. Let's dig into the first article here on Bloomberg. Norway decriminalizes personal drug use. That's crazy because Scandinavian countries are typically more regressive on drug policy than even in the US, it seems to me, or at least culturally regressive.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things about Scandinavian countries, they tend to enjoy science and try to lead pretty wealthy nations so they can kind of afford it, right? You two take anything up from this article?
No, it was pretty short. It seemed like a few paragraphs, but yeah, I mean, in the title here it says historic shift, and chatting with people from our classes, just people I've ran into over the years, talking about just drug policy in Norway and Scandinavia. Yeah, you're right. It's like people feel alone in their psychedelic use. It's really hard to find communities over there. So this does seem like a really big shift if they are planning on decriminalizing. It doesn't say when they'll be voting on it or anything like that. It just says they're planning to decriminalize personal use of illegal drugs in small quantities. So yeah, it's sweet.
Well, that means we need to learn more.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think what I thought of first was, doesn't Norway have like a really high suicide rate? I'm pretty sure. And I wonder if it's related. I wonder if this is like a way to lower that in a way. Probably not directly, but it could have that effect. Norway is like one of these weird countries that has like 22 hours of dark in some places this time of year and then like 20 hours of light in the summer. And I think it really affects people's mental health. And so, yeah, I wonder if, some personal consumption can help alleviate some of that. It's interesting.
It does say here, it says Norway along with its Nordic neighbors, has some of the Europe's highest drug-induced mortality rates.
Oh,
In
interesting.
contrast, the region's welfare systems ranked among the best globally. Norway had 66 cases of drug-related deaths per million adults in 2017, compared with an average of 23.7 for the European Union, according to the European Monitoring Center for Drugs and Drug Addiction.
Yeah, that's a lot of overdose deaths. I wonder if this law will, as well as allowing some personal use possession, like, will it also provide some kind of like drug testing and these other harm reduction services that, save lives? And if it like maybe legalizes those, or if were they illegal before, I actually don't know, but it's really exciting. I hope so.
Right. I would hope so, right? Like it's pretty clear that by providing testing services and also providing safe supply, you cut your rate of overdose, orders of magnitude, right? So let's hope, right? There's all sorts of political commentary we could get into here about Scandinavian countries and, depression. I think seasonal affective disorder, obviously. I think, the cultural baggage around being a drug user and depression and overdose is a big deal too. Lack of community, big deal. Yeah. And, what happens when you don't need to struggle a little bit to survive? Is there something there around motivation from too much welfare? We've been informed on this by a friend of ours from Finland who said, like, having everything taken care of, like, there's no real kind of like instinct, like will to power kind of thing that kind of like drives us, and I think that's quite philosophically complicated to get into that because like I'm all for this UBI thing and much more and a lot more healthcare, but are there philosophical implications beyond the regular discourse that we should look at? And then, how could Scandinavia fix it? If 30% of them were tripping regularly, maybe that would help. I don't know.
Maybe we'll see.
It's coming soon to a Scandinavian nation near you. Yeah. So a lot there. I don't know what to do with all that, but let's keep an eye.
Yeah. It's hard as Americans to even like imagine that, I think, so very interesting. I should do some more reading on that for sure.
So the next one here is California bill proposes decriminalizing psychedelic drugs generally, or is it just plants?
No, it says LSD, ketamine,
Tight.
MDMA are included. That's why I was really excited on this one. I think that's great.
Finally. And that's really interesting. They want psychedelic drugs and not all drugs, but it's still like, in my mind, a huge improvement, right? From like the standard DN kind of portfolio of plants and fungi.
Yeah, and according to the piece, peyote will not be included as requested, by the Native American Church.
Great.
So it is like pretty well thought out in that regard, which is cool. Yeah.
It's nice to see that sensitivity.
I know. I thought so too. So yeah, I'm looking forward. We'll see. I think this is the kind of thing that has to be voted on within the lawmakers in California, not like the citizens. So that's kind of where the article went, was the representative was like, we'll see, but if not, then the next step is a ballot initiative to the people, which I think is being worked on for 2022 just for psilocybin mushrooms, as far as I know. But so yeah, exciting developments. Statewide is such a big deal too. So that would be big and cool.
Yeah, it's huge. And I'm glad to see that they have also included expungement of those substances listed as well. That's, I think, a really
amazing,
huge fact.
Right. Like, we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah, right. Like, just thinking about the people that are still, maybe in prison in places for when cannabis is legalized, and it's like, why haven't they been released or their record expunged? That's we should be talking more about that.
Yeah, it says here also that it would create a commission to recommend a regulatory body tasked with overseeing psychedelic-assisted therapy for the treatment of mental health disorders. So that would be great too, and is lacking, right? Not that any other states like have legal psychedelics, but some kind of regulatory framework is really necessary. So it seems pretty comprehensive. We'll see. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like that's the benefit of watching this over time. We get to see the evolution and improvement, incremental improvement. Like it takes a lot of like this concept of political capital. Like you only have so many kind of like politics tokens to put in the machine, right? And, being a politician, you kind of have to like play the game of not only like influencing, what you and your constituency want, but, like how do I get reelected too? And it's like not spending political capital to be anti-drug in most states, right? Like be a really hardcore prohibitionist. You actually gain political capital in a lot of ways. But putting your neck on the line for something like this is quite risky for a politician.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good on you. and let's hope for more Oregon style initiatives, total decrim, total legalization in my mind. But, we got to baby steps, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What do we got next here?
And then we have another bill here in Massachusetts. So a new Massachusetts bill would decriminalize all drugs and study regulated sales of psychedelics. So Massachusetts lawmakers, this is coming from Marijuana Moment. Massachusetts lawmakers introduced legislation Friday that will attempt to end the state's war on drugs. One proposal would remove criminal penalties for possession of all drugs, while the other would establish a task force to study plant and fungi-based psychedelics with the eventual goal of legalizing and regulating substances. And as maybe some of you know, there have already been 2 towns in Massachusetts, Somerville and Cambridge, that have decriminalized plant medicines, so plant-based psychedelics.
It's pretty sweet. Kind of the 2 most lefty towns in Massachusetts, which is already quite a lefty place. I spent a lot of time in Somerville and Cambridge, so I'm glad to see both of those. And yeah, like Massachusetts theoretically is science-based, but let's see what happens. Can they do it?
Just the
I hope so. I think you can.
I feel like, yeah, I do too. I have a lot of hope. And I guess to me, like, even if it doesn't go through this time, the fact that there are so many statewide bills like this, kind of all of a sudden going, to the lawmakers and stuff is just, to me, such a good sign. Like, is change really coming? I think I'm getting like excited a little too early, but just the fact that it's in mainstream news too, the NBC News and all these kinds of publications and like broadcast networks that are covering this stuff. It's just getting it out there to people, and we're just slowly softening them toward legalizing all drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, like totally. Kyle?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, like, since Denver decriminalized psilocybin in 2019, I mean, we've seen the dominoes started to kind of fall. And just even thinking about the last election season, like, it's like plant medicines won, right? You had so many bills passed and initiatives passed, which was really exciting to see. It does feel like a very exciting moment. I was just chatting with a friend who texted me about New Jersey finally legalizing marijuana. Thank you, Murphy, for finally signing those bills and not postponing that anymore. It's been, but we've been waiting for it for a while. And I was just saying, like, yeah, who would have thought that this would be happening so soon? And I think I made a comment like, yeah, like psychedelics, like all these bills being passed. Like when I first started to become interested in this field and, wanted to go to school for transpersonal psychology to study this, I was like, there's no path. There's no it's going to be way far in the future. And, just how fast things are really changing. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And in the last handful of years, we've seen 2 countries fully legalize cannabis, Uruguay and Canada. What's the status in Mexico? Like, wasn't there some really big changes there?
It's still in the process of working everything out. There has been these bills like proposed and they haven't been signed or passed yet, but we're really, really close. They just keep postponing the meetings and stuff. I mean, a lot of it had to do with the pandemic, but also a lot of it had to do with, as we just talked about, like political capital. And when we got our new president, AMLO, elected here just a few summers ago, there was he campaigned a lot on legalizing marijuana for the whole country. And now that he's, been leading for a couple of years, it just seems like a little harder and a little bit like he bit off a little bit more than he can chew. But I am like in contact with a bunch of activists here, and hopefully it does pass soon. Especially, I mean, it could do so much for tourism and stuff here too. I mean, who doesn't love to go to Mexican beaches? And if there was like a dispensary right there, I mean, come on. I'm quite excited, but it's going to be a long process to write all the regulations for a recreational market that, also supports like growers and businesses here in Mexico rather than just like importing all these big corporations from Canada and the US. So there's a lot to it. I've written a bit about it. You guys want to go check it out. There's some old articles on my website about what it should look like for social justice here in Mexico. But it's coming. It's coming. Yeah. I believe it's coming.
Awesome. Yeah, it just pulled up some stuff. Like apparently in the south of Mexico, there's some coca growing for the cartels. And what that does is minimizes the amount of borders they have to cross. And as much as cocaine's kind of gross, it's also helping lead cartel violence and drug violence. So what would happen if there was all of a sudden like a fair trade organic cocaine supply in Mexico that was legal? Wouldn't that just like totally deflate the cartels?
There's already like a lot of illegal weed farmers who are just kind of like in cartel territory and are kind of like run by cartels. But the dream for activists here is how do we like help those pretty poor farmers transition to a legal market and get out of the control of the cartels? It could be a messy process, but it could do a lot, for all sorts of people down here and start to curb cartel violence. Activists here aren't like too excited that legalizing marijuana will totally end it, but it'll take some of their power away.
Marijuana's not enough.
Yeah.
It takes the edge off. Yeah.
Apparently also I've been reading reports that there's a bunch of fentanyl like factories here, not legal ones, like like Chinese cartel run, like the Chinese mafia and Mexican cartels have kind of gotten in bed together and and then that's where most of the fentanyl in the US is apparently coming from. I need to like vet some of this reporting, but it's scary.
You saw that like old KFC that was like a tunnel end point. That was like a fentanyl exit point. I think it was in Arizona, maybe. It's crazy.
Straight out of Breaking Bad.
Yeah. Like well, yeah, just a slightly different chicken restaurant.
Literally. Interesting. I didn't see that. I'll have to look into it. Not surprising, a little terrifying. Legalize everything.
Right. It's like, how else to keep an eye on endangered populations of things? I was watching, I'll nerd out for a moment. I was watching some Star Trek Discovery last night, which is kind of like the newest iteration. And there was like a whole ecological thing, like what happens when Starfleet collapses and no one's there to help protect endangered species. Like we kind of need regulation to stop markets from doing kind of gross stuff. And over harvesting is a big deal, leading us into this Tim Ferriss article. I was chatting with Mark Plotkin the other day, anthropologist, activist, runs the Amazon conservation team, also studied under Richard Schultes at Harvard. And not too many active people studied with him. So it's a big deal when we find those people. And he's the guy that kind of first documented ayahuasca in the English language, maybe. Yeah. And he was influential in, I think, turning on a lot of people at Harvard to psychedelics, maybe pre-Leary. So Tim writes this article urging people in the psychedelic space to become a little bit more ethical. This came shortly after Hamilton Morris's redo that needed to be redone on 5-MeO-DMT and the Sonoran Desert Toad. It seemed to me like Vice really missed it and didn't input the ecological critiques into their first edition of this. Not only did they highlight Jerry Sandoval, who's very problematic, they just totally missed the ecological angle as well. So it's like, what on earth did you do, Vice? So thankfully, Hamilton was able to do it over and really pushed people to not smoke toad and make 5-MeO. They told everybody on TV how to make it. And now they kind of redid that pamphlet Albert Most allegedly published with the real author. And I think Hamilton had some ads in there about like how to synthesize 5-MeO-DMT. Anyway, about this article, Michelle, like what kind of were some of your takeaways from this Tim Ferriss article?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. I thought it was really well done. In addition to kind of pleading with folks to stop using, 5-MeO DMT that come from the toad. He also mentions the peyote conservation efforts and how we should really leave the very few remaining peyote cactus in the wild for the Native American sacrament. But yeah, he also talks about iboga. I didn't really realize that iboga is also kind of close to being over harvested.
Totally.
And he says, unless you're like a really struggling opioid addict, like maybe not go for iboga. Maybe there's other options. And he does it in really sensitive language that I thought was really good. And then, he also goes into, and then he also actually, before I talk about that, talks about combo, which is the venom taken from tree frogs, right? And that's the main photo of the article, just how the venom is usually harvested from these frogs is animal abuse, if we're being honest. And how he thinks that most people who get combo do it for the Instagram story and the image of, the little marks on your skin, right, rather than, a real need for healing of that kind. And he has this great, he highlighted a couple of times. He says, sometimes good stories equal bad karma. And that kind of hit close to home. I was like, because I've been really rethinking like how to use my platform in psychedelics, and is this for likes or is this to get information out there, and I think he makes a really good point, something that we all have to really think about if we want to do this in an ethical way. And then he gets into things that are safer, like, why don't you just grow your own mushrooms? And that's where I was like, Tim Ferriss, yes. And just, mushrooms only take weeks to grow. They grow all over the world. And also the experience isn't as destabilizing as some of these other stronger, 5-MeO DMT and ayahuasca. He gets really real about how these can affect people, especially, the days, weeks, months later. He knows a lot of really strong psychonauts who got pretty destabilized for months after strong ayahuasca ceremonies, not their first times either. And I think we need to be talking about ayahuasca like that a little bit more. It's so trendy and mainstream, but it's like, this is really freaking strong medicine.
Yeah.
It's not something that everyone has to do. But yeah, I thought it was really great. Oh, and on that point on DMT and how strong it is, he has this great quote from David Luke and Gallimore. What's his first name? Andrew. Yeah, I actually just got in touch with them. I'm very excited. They're really cool researchers, and they have this book from 2016 where they, talk about the powerful shock of DMT, especially, and how those experiences, experience caused by DMT is like an unshakable feeling of authenticity that makes it impossible for the individual to deny the reality of the experience, nor dismiss it as a hallucination in spite of its bizarre nature. For many, there is an absolute certainty regarding the reality of the DMT experience that clashes so powerfully with people's most basic assumptions regarding reality that it produces a state of ontological shock, which he quotes John Mack, regarding the ultimate nature of reality. And this is so real, and it's why psychedelic integration is so important. But the ontological shock of a really strong psychedelic experience isn't something we talk about in a lot of these mainstream articles where it can cure depression and all these things. It's like, yeah, maybe, but it also comes with all these other, I don't know if you want to call them side effects, but it takes a lot of strength and inner work and reflection to go through these strong processes. Yeah.
There's absolutely a lot to it.
So
people think they want the most exotic experience, and maybe that's not what you need or want. Maybe that's not what's most helpful. Maybe that's actually harmful. Yeah. I'm not as much of an optimist as many out there are about the impact of psychedelics generally to individuals and culture. I'm certainly more optimistic than, Nixon was, but, I see real harm can happen. People can go pretty nuts and need to be, hospitalized at times. And it's horrifying that that's the case. People can lose jobs, lose friends, lose family, lose all their money, lose their careers. Anything that you can lose could be lost due to a really explosive psychedelic experience. And Kyle, your point is always, are you at a position right now where you can handle that?
Yeah. I think that's really important to ask yourself, right? because you don't know like what's going to get amplified, and can you really manage that right now in your life? Yeah, and I think this is something that we keep coming back to as the explosion of interest happens with psychedelics. Yeah, what type of, how many experiences are people going to have, especially with something like as powerful as 5-MeO? I don't know how many people have reached out just saying they've had really powerful experiences and it's just been really, really challenging to integrate, or they feel like really out of their body still. And I think that's the interesting thing, being on the side of like, I guess like doing journalism, reporting, people seem to reach out and share experiences with us. And then also like coaching clients that I've worked with of like, finding me because they're like, I don't know what to do with this experience, and hearing some of the, the difficulties that you don't always, I guess, hear about in, a lot of mainstream articles. And so, this is something I've always have thought about too. And I guess thinking about some of my past experiences and how challenging they were, and just the idea of spiritual emergencies and how many people might be catapulted in spiritual emergencies. This is something we definitely talk about in our class often. Like, are we really, do we have the cultural framework to support these types of experiences? Psychiatry and mental health have the, the framework to support these experiences? I don't know. I don't think so, right? Because it's a kind of a different way of viewing mental health, or just like experience and reality, right? Somebody comes back and say, wow, like my energy is just flowing. It's like, how does medicine deal with that, right? It's like, oh, I have all these psychosomatic symptoms after this, this experience, and it feels energetic. And then you go to the doctor and they can't find anything. And then all of a sudden, you're left feeling like, what the hell's wrong with me now? I'm, it's a new way of being in the world. Now all this stuff is manifesting in my body differently, and medicine has no idea what to do with it. And I've been there on that side, and it's frustrating. It's scary. Some days I was like, am I going crazy?
Yeah, I'm just glad we can talk about it here, because, it just doesn't fit into that narrative where it's like, can psychedelics revolutionize mental health? Well, it's like, yes, but not just help people heal. Like, it's changing the way, we have to change the way we think about the human experience. And we have to let in so many other kind of weird, unworldly experiences to really fully, it's going to revolutionize mental health. It's going to revolutionize everything if we really integrate it and take all aspects of it into consideration. But that's really hard for doctors and these psychiatrists in training to really do. They just want a new medication to help their patients. Do they really want to rethink reality? That's just for weirdos like us. No, I'm kidding. Everyone should rethink reality, but it's challenging, it's hard.
But it will require a paradigm shift. And, are these traditional structures ready for that? And I think to some extent the answer is no, because it requires a lot of falling apart. And I think, we don't like when things fall apart. We hold on tighter when that happens. But yeah, I mean, even just thinking about my own experiences with this, I mean, it's really kind of made me question, the traditional systems and what is health and wellness. And, sometimes when I'm in conversations with other clinicians and it's so pathology oriented, and I'm like, do we need to keep continuing that language at times? Could there be other ways of viewing and seeing this? And, how psychedelics, or not even psychedelics, just extraordinary experience in general, can help shift our view of what it means to be human? What does it mean to be well in the world? Do I always need to be sick when I come to a mental health professional, right? Do I always need some sort of diagnosis? And I think, these are the questions that, my exceptional experiences have made me think about traditional systems and how they've really shifted over the years.
So interesting. Well, I think the work you guys are doing and providing the course for doctors is so important to try to help people start to think about this in a new way. And I don't know. I just hope that more people start to see the big picture in a way about this stuff. It's beyond healing, even though healing's so important. And I know it's and I'm so glad that a lot of these substances can help people do that, but it's bigger than healing.
Right. Can we, this is a great tangent. We can come back to the ethics thing if we need to, but I heard a participant in one of the religious leaders studies, I think at NYU, say something along the lines of, what are we really doing when we're medicalizing psychedelics? Is there a part of this where we're reducing mysticism to a medical application. And, in part, yeah, like that's a lot of the way we're framing it. It's not totally true either, but it's, something to consider. And what is the mystical? I was talking to all these priests on Monday, and I brought up like Pascal's wager. Have either of you heard of Pascal's wager?
It sounds familiar, but no, explain it. Yeah, I don't know.
So Blaise Pascal is like a pretty important, influential philosopher, and his whole wager was around faith in God and Christianity in particular. And the wager was either 0 or infinity. So he tried to like mathematize it and say like, okay, so if I don't believe, if I don't have faith and don't do what the church says, I lose. Like the total cost is 0. Like I lose really nothing if I do believe in it. So you end up with like a 0. There's just no afterlife, no nothing, whatever. But if you do believe in it, you get this infinity, which is like the promise of afterlife and all this other stuff. So it's like 0 versus infinity. You should probably bet towards infinity if the cost is really, really low. And that's Pascal's wager. And then if we want to look at that in terms of like religion and psychedelics, there's a good crossover here. Like we can actually provide that mystical experience, which is that equivalent to infinity in terms of like heaven/afterlife thinking. Yeah. So they seem to appreciate it. I thought it was like a helpful framing of this kind of medicalization versus mystical experience, and religion without psychedelics, religion with psychedelics, like there's something there. Yeah. And that leads into this Vice article.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Psychedelic therapy needs to confront the mystical. Kyle, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so this is by Shayla Love at Vice. And yeah, the title, Psychedelic Therapy Needs to Confront the Mystical. Many people have spiritual experiences on psychedelics. How they make meaning of it could influence the metaphysical beliefs of their therapists. A lot of this actually kind of goes over a lot of Dr. Matthew Johnson's paper. And, if you want to go back and listen to our episode with Dr. Matthew Johnson, you could do that. We kind of get into this whole idea of like bringing the mystical into the clinical research and ethics around that. And I think, yeah, this article really kind of touches on a lot of the key points that Matthew has brought up. And to some degree, I can respect that, right? Like if we're like doing clinical research or just like certain aspects of therapy, like how can we keep it a little secular at times and really allow people to make their own meaning out of their experiences, kind of like from the breathwork world, right? Like people have these mystical spiritual experiences with breathwork. The main framework that we come in there with is some of the Groffian framework talking about transpersonal and perinatal birth matrices, but we're not trying to impose a certain framework on people, right? We're not trying to impose a certain belief system. Like you are coming here to do this thing, right? It's like we're coming here to explore in a sense, to really kind of have an experience. And that experience could look like many different things. And, I think it's important for you to make meaning out of that experience. And so I definitely agree on that side of like, how do we, I guess, create that container for people to develop their own meaning around the mystical. But yeah, then on the flip side, like, how much does like shamanistic techniques play a role? Being able to go to ceremonies and have that framework to work in, and it's like, I think that's important too. For some people, they're really going to need those spiritual frameworks and beliefs. Maybe it's more part of their narrative, and that container can actually do maybe more good for them if that's like the narrative that they really believe in and really want to be a part of. And maybe being part of like too much of a neutral territory might be like, now what? What am I doing? It's so, yeah, I see both sides here. It's interesting. And I mean, it's something we've brought up, a lot of times, like just the importance of, actually, Joe and I were just talking about this on an interview, why transpersonal psychology is really important for this field and the importance of, integrating transpersonal theories and ideas into Western psychology. So at least we have some sort of framework to anchor to when people are having these transpersonal mystical experiences. But yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on your end, Michelle or Joe?
Yeah, you bring up great points. And I think the article did a really good job of giving both sides like a say. And like, yeah, it is kind of weird when, really new agey therapists kind of put all the, and, the Buddha statue and the clinical trials and all these little details they touch on, like, is alienating for some folks. Like, yeah, sure, I'm one of those people sometimes. When I like meet new psychedelic community or facilitators and, they have feathers in their hair and it's all hippy dippy. And I'm just like, I don't know if we're going to get on. Like, I don't know about this. And it's very real. But on the other hand, yeah, it's like, how do you help people really integrate an experience without this kind of transpersonal mystical experience without a spiritual framework? I think Roz Watts from Imperial, who I guess is now at Synthesis, has a good quote in here where she's struggled as an integration therapist in clinical trials. Like, when someone has a really transpersonal experience and she's just supposed to be like a blank slate, she's like, I can't just be like, I'm a blank canvas. What does it mean to you? Like, these people really need help deciphering these kinds of scary, transpersonal type, like it was like a dragon or something she talked about in this piece. And I really related to that. I don't have a good answer, except I kept coming back to like, in the future, if this is legal, I would love options, right? Like, so you can go do a ceremony, maybe in group, maybe solo, whatever makes you feel more comfortable in like whatever tradition. And then you can have that spiritual experience. Or you can go to a really secular therapist and do this, or maybe there'll be other things in the middle too. I would love that. But that's like pretty far down the line. The retreat circuit sort of starts to have these kinds of options, but since they're all kind of like in the gray market, it can be hard to vet and stuff. So when it's all like legal and regulated, that's what I would love to see personally. And then people can just choose what feels right to them.
Right. This is like that topic of culting out and niching out. It's like there's so many niches to fill here. Like people that are into earth religion might want to do it in kind of like a Wicca setting. People might want to do it in a Kabbalah setting. And they probably are already. I've got a book called Shamanic Kabbalah behind me. It's already happening. And so how do we have this kind of diversity and also try to provide like good facilitation as a scene? I kind of don't want to call it a culture anymore, but for a lot of reasons. But how do we maintain some sort of integrity with the amount of diversity that we want to see? And it's kind of hard, right? Because one alternative is a monoculture that turns out to be kind of like not very nutritious food, and the other one, could be quite nutritious to us. Like, what might some of these secular researchers say about doing facilitation or doing research with a Jungian analyst, like, or really Groff-focused person? Like, we had a little bit of kind of second guessing ourselves after talking to Matt Johnson about like how we facilitate breathwork. We're like, wait, what? Okay, interesting. The fact that Matt Johnson had never seen a past life experience or somebody reporting that in all of his sessions seemed a little fucked up to me. It didn't seem real. But perhaps that's just not him framing it and putting his narrative on top of that experience and interpreting it for the public. Maybe, my past life experiences are really shady, cloudy. Like, I can't really, in all honesty, say if I think they were past life experiences. It was just kind of part of the sense I got. Oh, here's some Whitehead. This is called the fallacy of presentational immediacy. So what we perceive, it's not necessarily what it is, right? That's what that fallacy is. I was studying some Whitehead this morning, brushing up for our class tonight. And like there's something big there. Like, so I would just say, like, we're here to cheerlead you scientists and the culture at large, or scene at large, but also like, let's collaborate and be part of the same team that wants to keep everybody safe and keep this thing moving forward. Like, I want weirdos out there. Like, I loved that wizard in Hamilton that was snorting PCP in the desert. Like, that was amazing. You remember that one? like fascinating. But, like, that's not something that I can necessarily like universalize and say is a good thing for everybody to do. Like, it's kind of risky thing to say everybody should do that.
It's entertaining though. Thank you, Hamilton.
All right. So let's transition to Alex Jones.
Wait, before that, let's talk about the dream study, right?
Good call. Yes.
Because then Alex Jones is related.
All right. Where do you want to go with the dreams?
Okay, so there was this really cool new study out that, okay, I read it in New Atlas, but Vice also did a really cool piece on it. And it was called Scientists Establish Freaky Two-Way Communication with Lucid Dreamers. And basically, researchers from like 4 different nations, like the U.S. was included, and then there was like, I think Norway was one of them. There was 3 other countries, and they all did this really similar research project where they took lucid dreamers and regular dreamers, and then they trained them in the art of lucid dreaming and basically tried to have two-way exchanges with these people while they were asleep. And some of it was successful, which is so crazy cool. And so basically they had these lucid dreamers like go asleep in the lab. And before they slept, they trained them to answer questions by like moving their eyes. They had like a left, right, left, right, left, right, like these predetermined ways that they would communicate while they were asleep, or they would like move their mouth or brow muscles to answer questions. And some people were able to answer like simple math problems while they were asleep. Like there was one guy who was able to answer what's 6 subtracted from 8, like 3 separate times. Wow. And I think that's so fascinating. And others like yes and no questions. Like someone was asked, do you speak Spanish? And they were able to do the facial movement for no, because they didn't speak Spanish. And I thought what was also really fascinating is these lucid dreamers, how they perceive the questions. Like the researcher was just asking the question in daylight, and the lucid dreamer could hear it like in the dream. But it often wasn't like, it was often like kind of like through a radio or through some voice, like, and like they were in the scene with friends, and then someone was asking from above, like, do you speak Spanish? And they were like, no. And I just think it's fascinating. And I don't know what you guys thought about it. I could stop for a second.
About time.
I think that is really fascinating. I was skimming through this article. I didn't get to read the whole thing in detail, but I don't know. Lucid dreaming has always been an interest of mine, and just even thinking about like, I guess some of my own experiences with like dreaming and lucid dreaming, like having external stimuli influence my dream somehow, and that being incorporated into my dream. Yeah. So for example, like, I mean, this isn't the same as talking, but there was a time in my life where it was for like a few weeks where I would get really lucid in my dreams, and I ended up turning off my alarm like during it, where the alarm was playing in my dream, and I don't ever remember waking up and actually turning it off. Maybe like I was still asleep and was kind of like, sleepwalking type of thing, but I was totally in my dream, and I would turn my alarm off because it was going off in my dream, and I never remember actually waking up to do it, and just thinking, and then I wake up and be like, did my alarm go off? And then checking it, and I completely turned it off. I'm like, what the hell just happened there? Yeah, and so like I have had experiences that have been influenced by the external world at times. And yeah, I find it interesting.
I had a similar one recently where I was traveling, in the pandemic, and I had my mask on, my KN95, because I wanted to be really safe. And I fell asleep while I was traveling. And then I had these dreams where it was like, you don't need to wear a mask in this situation. Why are you wearing a mask? And I'd wake up and I'd be trying to take my mask off. And I was like, no, you have to keep that on. Like, it was really weird. And I hadn't really experienced anything like that for a while. But I guess for me, like, why this is so interesting is just like A, they could train lucid dreamers to do this, and B, like, what is possible? Like, if we actually like had all this time, like if we didn't need to do all this human stuff and make money and buy food and cook meals and all this time consuming things, like if we could just like spend our whole days training our minds to do like kind of psi or telepathic things, like maybe it's possible. I don't know. I get a little too excited from this kind of stuff.
Well, I'll share. I don't know if I've shared this before on the podcast, but this was like one of my big dreams that still I scratch my head and go, I don't know how to really explain this. So in the dream, I was walking around my town, and I went down to the convenience store, and I remember, and I guess I should preface, before all this happened in the dream, I was in Hawaii studying like plant medicine, indigenous stuff with Kat Harrison and whatnot. And I think like that day she talked about the Mazatec people eating mushrooms and pears. So my dream starts off people had these mushrooms and I go, oh, we got to eat them in pairs because Kat told us that they sing to each other. So in my dream, I eat these mushrooms in pairs and they start like taking on. And I walk down to the convenience store in my town and it just got robbed. And I go, man, town's going to shit. And then I walk a little bit more and there's this kid with this AK-47 and he's pointing it at people. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, it's just for fun. I was like, it's not for fun. You're really scaring people. And I was like, you can't do that. He's like, no, it's just a joke. It's all for fun. I'm like, yeah, you can't do that. So I grab the gun away from him and I stare down the barrel and it's got like, you know, the red dot on it. And I go, okay, I could see why you think this is fun. You're getting a reaction out of people. But I was like, you can't do this. Like, you're really scaring people. He's like, it's just a joke. So I take the gun and I throw it underneath this red pickup truck. So then I wake up and so I'm in Hawaii and what is that, like 7 hours time difference? I wake up at like 7 or 8 in the morning and I grab my phone and there's a text message from my best friend and it reads, yo, town's going to shit. Quick Check just got robbed the other night and the whole town's on lockdown. There's a SWAT team everywhere. There's somebody that's saying they have an AK-47 and they're threatening to shoot the town up. And I just like wipe my eyes and I go, am I dreaming still? Like, what the fuck is going on? So I immediately grab my phone to Google what's going on in town. They present this whole story that somebody called in from an untraceable number threatening to shoot up a town and with an AK-47 and they couldn't find them or anything like that. And they finally like wrapped up the investigation. I don't know at this point, like 5 years ago, well, more than 5 years ago, because I was still in Vermont when they wrapped it up. It was a prank phone call coming from North Korea. And yeah, and it's just like, you know, that dream was happening as the event was unfolding. And I go, what's going on there? And you know, I thought to myself, did I check my phone? But I didn't because the message would have been read if I, you know, read through it. So the message was left unread. I didn't see it. What's going on there? How did I get that through the dream world? And like with so much kind of accuracy where I go, what the fuck is that all about?
Oh my God, Kyle, I think you were astral projecting. But maybe you like ran into the person who was from Korea and also astral projecting. He's like, it's cool, man. It's just a joke. I can't believe you just blew my mind a little. I'm not going to be able to finish the podcast. I'm just kidding. That's
gotta go.
Fascinating. Yeah. So that's why this study to me, I'm like, this is the first step in actually something really interesting. And that like your story kind of reminds me. So I've been doing a bunch of near-death experience research, and there's this whole field that people have been trying to prove. Like a lot of people who have near-death experiences, like in a hospital, they astral project and they stay in the room. They have like out-of-body experiences. But the weird thing that like parapsychologists love to look into is some of these people have details from the hospital room that they could have never known otherwise. Yeah, like this nurse said this thing, or like they could just like knew the names and the faces of nurses they didn't meet before they went in. You know, they must have seen it from some kind of other like space that the psyche can inhabit. And to me, like it just opens so many like unanswerable questions that I love pondering before I never fall asleep at night about just like, you know, the dream world to me has always been so fascinating because it's like the natural psychedelic everyone has every night. You know, dreams are so weird.
It's the most psychedelic.
It's more, right? It's like there's no psychedelic that really touches how weird dreams are. And yet we go to that place every night. And if we can have more control in there, it's fascinating. Now, the study goes into like kind of, or the articles on the study rather, go in at the end. They're like, and the researchers are really excited for the applications. And then it gets a little capitalistic. It's like, well, maybe you could be like learning new skills in your dream and all these like productivity things. But it also like had a thing about, you know, this could be great for like artists and writers. And I was like, yeah, like there's nothing more creative and weird than your dream world. And lucid dreaming in itself is so fascinating and hard to do, which is like maybe a whole other conversation. But like if you can learn that and then like continue your learning, I mean, I bet there's people out there doing it. But I'm really excited. I need to like look more into this. I need to get in the next study. But I'm really excited by all of this. I think it's really closely related to psychedelics. I can't explain how, but maybe it's all like a similar dimension that we're entering. I don't know.
I call it all psyche.
Have you either? It's
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Have either of you seen the OA season 2?
Not me.
I forget. Feel free to spoiler alert it.
No, I'm not going to spoil. I'm not going to spoil it. But there's a part in OA 2 where they have this dream testing center and they're harvesting information from the dreams. Just really interesting. If anybody wants to dig into the OA and season 2, well, I would watch both seasons. But yeah, they get into some really interesting things there of like trying to predict things from the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. But yeah, dreams are, I don't know what to make of them.
Like we've seen those kind of brain studies where someone's looking at an object and they can kind of brain scan to like get that object somehow. Like we're progressing brain science quite a bit. So like that stuff isn't maybe as outlandish as we might think. Like there's a whole debate going on in our Facebook group right now about the Qualia Research Institute and being able to like mathematically model various states of consciousness, which I feel like the languaging might be a little wrong there. Maybe just call it a state, mind state, as opposed to state of consciousness, because consciousness has so much baggage when we use that word that I don't like using it. And when I see somebody else use it, I immediately get turned off because they talk about something abstract and then they want to put like concrete things on it. And it's like, well, no, you're trying to concretize like an abstraction, and that doesn't really work very well, especially when you're talking about mind. And those of us in this transpersonal psychology world believe that mind is beyond the brain and psyche is beyond the brain. So it's an interesting thing. And Kyle, I don't know if I told you this yet, but I lined up a recording with Matt Siegel, PhD philosophy professor at CIIS, to talk about a Whiteheadian approach to this idea of qualia and mathematizing it, engineering it, and where there might be some shortfalls in their arguments. So that's going to be a fun one. But nothing like smoking DMT.
Did we ever have Matt on the show?
Yeah, way back maybe. I hope so.
Okay, yeah. I think you're right. I know we all recorded in Claremont, but that never got released.
I think I was drunk. Yeah, no, we had him on, I think, in 2018, actually.
Okay, yeah.
August 16th.
I do remember that now.
2019. Yep. Yeah.
August 16th, that's my birthday.
Something like that. So Matt Siegel, Psychedelics Day, you'll find it. Yeah, I remember getting super aggro about the ecological situation because it was like a psychedelics and ecology conference, kind of a small private thing in LA, Claremont College. And yeah, I was all fired up. So I think I still have the recording, but I don't think I want to put it out there.
No, I think we got some requests not to release it.
Mostly from me.
Now I have to hear it. No, I'm just kidding.
It's on one of these million SD cards here in the house. All right, Michelle, now we got to talk about the fun one.
Yeah.
The government programs.
So this dream article that I got really into reminded me of an Alex Jones and Joe Rogan interview from, I think, 2019. So it's a bit old now. But basically, Alex Jones went on Joe Rogan for the second time he was on Joe Rogan and says that there are, this is an article also from Marijuana Moment titled, Alex Jones Says Secret Government Program Uses Psychedelics to Communicate with Aliens. And basically, he thinks that there are like deep state agents who take like really high doses of DMT to, have entity experiences. But not only that, like they're going in for like intergalactic foreign policy meetings with the aliens by smoking DMT. He has all these like sources, which is like, Alex Jones, I don't really believe you. However, I want to believe, I always want to believe the truth is out there. But what does he say? He says, in San Francisco, the breakaway rogue intelligence agencies have an alien base where they are literally communicating with intergalactic beings. And they've got like astronaut level people taking super hardcore levels of drugs. This is a direct quote. And going into meetings with these things and making intergalactic deals. And then Joe Rogan, the voice of reason, literally, he's like, yeah, but you have some kind of communication with something else, like on DMT. The question is that something else inside your own psyche, or is there a chemical doorway inside the mind that opens up? I mean, I still want to believe in the chemical doorway, but I got to say, Joe Rogan sounds pretty sane, and it's probably just some kind of subconscious entity experience. However, entity experiences on, smoking DMT extract are really common, and they're pretty unexplainable. And, if we can open our psyche to communicate while we're lucid dreaming, I don't know, there might be something there. Like, are we communicating with another dimension, some kind of spirit realm when we go into these like pretty deep experiences? There's a lot of arguments there. I don't know if we're having intergalactic meetings, however.
It sounds like he heard about Daniel McQueen's DMTX inspired by Strassman and Gallimore. And then like smoked some weed and freaked himself out about it. But, this is essentially what DMTX wants to look at. What happens when we have more prolonged exposure to pure DMT? Can we become a little bit more like a black belt in that space and be able to communicate in that space? What is that space? Like Gallimore seems to suggest it's literally alien space. Like in his alien information theory, that seems to be what he's talking about. And I don't want to totally discount it. I think Alex Jones is full of shit and like jumps to conclusions a little too quickly. I used to love Alex Jones. I'm sorry, everybody, for admitting that publicly, but I used to be obsessed.
Hey,
really?
Me too.
And then I went down the rabbit hole.
I was like 18, 19, but then
I debunked everything that I ever read. And I'm like, okay, like after debunking everything I ever read on your site, dude, like I can't in good conscience pay attention to you anymore because you're literally wasting my time and spinning me down like a very non-productive direction. And I'm a little spiteful about that, all the time and attention I gave him. While it was quite entertaining and engaging, it also probably lost me a lot of friends, So thus why I try to have this kind of weird critical balance. Like I believe in the weird shit, but I have to like couch that belief quite a bit. Like kind of show me.
Absolutely. I love reading about it. I find it so fascinating, but I'm just like, I'm a skeptic through and through all the time, but it is fascinating to learn about. I mean, Alex Jones, I don't know. I've never taken him very seriously, but the fact that there's someone so mainstream saying this, I guess he's not that mainstream, but so big. I think it's interesting. I think I want to keep looking into it. I don't know. More psychedelic conspiracy theories are fun to think about a little bit until you.
Right. This quote here had me kind of laughing or just seems kind of ridiculous. It was right after that quote that you read, Michelle, but it says, Jones said the process of making intergalactic connection goes, quote, even deeper too. In other cases, for more advanced psychonauts, they, quote, turn their heart off for 5 minutes and they pump oxygen into your blood and you're in the meeting. You're in the meeting with freaking aliens.
That's literally the plot to Flatliners.
Like, what?
Great movie, though.
That sounds dangerous. Yeah, don't turn your heart off.
Didn't we learn
That's
that from Flatliners? Don't do that. It doesn't work.
Well, they've got those machines, but it's not like they're like he's not even talking about those machines. Well, he's trying to not do that. Like they've been using them a lot for COVID treatment. Like when people's bodies and hearts need to actually really rest. They like I wish I knew the name of them. It totally circulates circumvents your heart and does what the heart needs to do. And a lot of the functions that the lung need to do. So your lungs and heart can rest.
It reminds me of this fiction book, but I can't remember the name. But there is a book that I read a year or two ago. I'll look it up so we can put it in the show notes, where the main characters like do this kind of flatlining thing to release endogenous DMT, and they end up, but like with this like time machine, and it ends up being the answer to time travel. And it's actually like great. It's speculative fiction, but it's really fun read if you're looking for some great psychedelically inspired fiction. I can't remember the title or the author because I read it on my Kindle, but I'll put it in the show notes for you guys.
Cool. So what else do we got? that it? I think we covered a lot of territory.
I think that was it. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's more articles, but yeah, I think that was about it for the articles.
We're posting an interview on Tuesday's episode of a big psychedelic CEO to be unnamed until you see the episode on Tuesday. We held off on it because I felt a little awkward about it. Like some of the discussion around the drug war and some other things like got me a little conflicted about whether I should post it or not. Not to mention how political some of these things are in the space. Like, am I going to be next on the psychedelic media hit list? Maybe. But, I think I did a good enough job there representing what might be seen as a psychedelic community. Yeah. Can we talk about that real quick? This idea of psychedelic community, like us as one group of people, and how I feel like that's not really a thing anymore. Like maybe that was a thing in the 60s, but like it's such a weird concept. We got so many different like tribes and camps now.
Yeah.
That it's kind of hard to have a conversation across tribal lines.
It's not cohesive, right? I mean, there's a lot of different agendas, a lot of different like communities that are doing different things. And yeah, I mean, I guess the similarity and the commonality is an interest in psychedelics to some degree. But yeah, we're seeing fractures and people with different opinions, different agendas, different camps.
It's not really a bad thing though necessarily, right? I mean, there's always going to be, once a group gets bigger, there's going to be like subgroups with different interests. Like I know for me as someone who's kind of new to this whole scene in the past 2-3 years, like I don't know. I didn't really relate to the psychedelic community that was already there at first because it seemed just like not my speed. I'm more of a punk. Like, I don't know. I wasn't so interested in the new agey. I don't do yoga every day. I'm only learning how to meditate. I'm like, I didn't really know if I fit in. But once I started being more open about who I was and I still like psychedelics and find them fascinating and the human mind and experience and these other things, like, you start to find the others that are related to you. Like, I'm not going to be friends with everyone in the psychedelic community, right? We just don't all have enough other similar interests or worldviews to get on. But the more open you are about being an individual in the psychedelic community, I think the more you find the people that are more like you as well. And also, like, don't psychedelics teach us to, like, okay, I don't mean to say it like that, but psychedelics have taught me to really value my individuality and to, be my own person. And then it gets confusing how the psychedelic community can seem so like monotone in a way. Like, you all have to be this like one way, where obviously like everyone's an individual and we're all different. And so I kind of like that it's getting more diverse in I don't know, to me it's,
we need it. Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying at the same time.
Yeah. I just don't want to misidentify it as like a cohesive community.
Yeah.
It's certainly like you can draw an outline around the population and identify the people interested in psychedelics or like heavily involved in them. But that's like, not necessarily a great descriptor. Like, for instance, our article recently on like 18-MC versus Ibogaine, like really controversial, apparently, 29 comments, like over 100 shares. And like, seems like people really dislike this concept that synthetics that are less psychedelic or have no psychedelics are worthless drugs.
There's a really great point in Tim's article about that. I thought I'm glad he pointed that out. See if I could find it.
Yeah.
Said, let's see, one more note.
Yeah.
Please don't make the all too common mistake of assuming that, quote, all natural means safer. The deadly poisons of strychnine and hemlock are derived from plants and some psychedelic plants, such as datura, brugmansia, and the animals are well respected among indigenous peoples for their ability to kill. Similarly, don't assume that synthetic psychoactive agents are automatically less effective or therapeutic than natural products. Many of us, present company included, wouldn't have survived childbirth or childhood without synthetics. There's pros and cons to both and places for both and responsible and irresponsible ways to use both. And I think that's important.
Right. Tim regularly uses this concept of like minimum effective dose. I've spent a lot of time with Tim's work, and it's been really helpful. And this idea of like, what's the least you need to do to get the result you want? And, that's counterintuitive, right? But like, what is, why are you drinking ayahuasca? What's the result you want? Why are you using ibogaine, or iboga? Like, why are you doing that? What's the result you want? Is there an alternative that might have a better risk profile? Like the psychedelic experience isn't perfectly predictable. And like the safe containers aren't really here yet to be able to support that. Like, I think in time we can get there, but it's not here yet.
I also like he had a point where it was like, you don't need to try every psychedelic for like your psychedelic passport or like your psychedelic street cred. He doesn't use either of those phrases, but he's like, there's something to be said about forming a deep relationship with one medicine. Like you don't need to go try them all. And that's something that I can relate to. Like, yeah, I mean, I really find so much value in my own developing relationship with mushrooms, and you don't need to go try, even though I'm always curious. And so I'm like the worst example, but like, there is something to be said about just getting comfortable in a space and working there. You don't need to like go to every planet. I don't know. I think that was an interesting point personally, but he also has a point. He's like, even though synthetics are not as like dangerous as these plant medicine only people will have you think, he knows a lot of people that were very destabilized by high doses of LSD, and I do as well. And, the whole like ketamine and ketamine can be really chill in a low dose, but once you K-hole, it's like, it's really, you can, feels like you're dead for like 20 minutes, and that's really intense. And it can be beneficial too, but it's more about just kind of, for me, the only time I really fully K-holed, I was just so glad to be back. It was like, God, I'll be back to my depression. I'll be back to whatever. At least I'm back. Like
that's what death feels like? Cool.
I think it depends. That's what ketamine near death feels like. I think an actual NDE has a bit more of like a homecoming spiritual element, as my research shows, but not everyone. Everyone's different.
Well, my experience.
Yeah, we should talk about that more.
That's not what my ketamine injection felt like. Just felt really shadowy. And, it reminded me a little bit more of like Greek underworld kind of stuff that Lenny mentions. Kind of like shadowy, kind of not much going on, not much personality. It's just like this jumble of kind of entities. Anyway, that's probably enough for now. And I don't know. Any last thoughts before we wrap here? Cool.
I don't think so.
Well, I'm getting another COVID test in just a little bit. Can't wait. And yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. Well, for everybody that wants to get more education on psychedelics, check out psychedeliceducationcenter.com. We've got a lot of offerings there, including our course for clinicians and therapists. We offer CEs for psychologists, nurses, and therapists in the state of California. Highly transferable, but you got to check with your licensing board. We unfortunately don't have that confirmed for you yet. And yeah, it's about 47 hours of material, including class time with us. And we think you'll love it. We've been told it's an amazing value. We just got some amazing fan mail recently from, I think, a soon to retire therapist about it. And it's really just great to hear. We'll probably share that.
Oh, and an update on the student course. I know we mentioned that before. We're going to postpone that, probably relook at that at June. So if you're curious in that, just, we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, get on our email list if you're not. And just keep listening to the podcast. You'll hear about it for sure. I think we'll have a better offering and more offerings. So stay tuned, everybody. All right. Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Michelle. And
thank you.
We'll see you all on Tuesday. Bye-bye, everybody.